Israel Update with Gadi and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's been 1 year, 3 months, and 15 days since this war began. I am Gadi in Tel Aviv.
And I am Mike Duran in Washington, D.C.
And we are, for now,
as sane as possible under the circumstances.
And we are going to have to get also a new tagline, Mike. Do you know that? Are you aware of that?
No, our tagline is great.
It is great. It's very funny. But we are going to need, at one point, a tagline that says, that conveys the actual message, especially when we launch the new edition, which our subscribers are not yet aware of.
Wait, you're telling me things I don't understand. What is the actual message?
The actual message is we need some variation of we cut through the media bias line, which was
you're back to this. You're back to this.
It doesn't ring enough. It doesn't ring enough well enough yet. But you know that this is our strength.
Is that right?
Sanity. It is that.
I think our strength is sanity. Okay.
You should say it with a different face, Mike. You can't say it with that smile because it looks loony. So you can't say we're sane with that smile.
The reason I have a smile is because I am sane. I don't have my intestines are not in a knot like everyone else.
Yeah. Well, that was convincing, but yet you will need at some point to convey the actual message that we are.
I want everyone to know that you. I want everyone to know. I want
the counterbalance we are to the whole of the media narrative, which is actually false.
Yeah. Okay.
It is.
Okay.
We will have to return to what we argued about last time, which was whether or not there can be a Palestinian force that would rule Gaza without Israeli occupation and would completely root out the fanaticism of Hamas. I'm glad for you that you didn't look at the comments. I would have said that 99.9% of them sided with me, but I'm afraid that's not true. It's actually 100. So
I did not. Yeah. So I did not. I'm afraid that I've been extremely busy and I didn't get a chance to read the comments. I'm feeling very bad about that. But I got comments from people by email and other ways, but they're very unhappy with what I said.
Yeah, and that's probably a sign of truth. Galileo was exactly like Galilei was exactly like you.
Exactly. It's a sign that I'm right and the rest of you are wrong. We'll discuss this. I think we're talking past each other. But the fact that you guys are also, I'm saying this to the audience out there, that you're also fixated on this issue shows me that you are not fixated on the right issue at all. There are two issues you need to be fixated on, and you're not fixated on them.
I can guess.
We will come back to this. We'll come back.
So let's start with the headlines, Mike. It was a whirlwind week.
So I'm going to rush through the headlines here, Gadi. We all know what they are. Donald Trump was inaugurated. Yeah, he was inaugurated. He came out immediately with a number of decisions that are extremely important for the Middle East, including ending or temporarily halting the support for UNRWA, including probably, he hasn't made the decision yet, but he's inclined to lift the restrictions on arms shipments to Israel. And he's made some appointments, which we'll talk about in a minute, that are interesting and relate to the debate that we had or discussion we had last week about what the main currents in Trump's Middle East vision are. Can you have currents in a vision? The main currents in his thinking. The other big news, Gadi, is that Herzi Halevi is resigned. He is going to be chief of staff of the IDF for another month and a half or so. But he submitted his letter of resignation, and of course the deal that we discussed last week has come into force, and 3 hostages were released on Sunday, and another 3 will be released in about every 7 days for the next 6 weeks. So, Gadi, over to you.
Yeah, let's start with Herzi Halevi. Herzi Halevi resigned after a long and tumultuous, do you say? Am I pronouncing that right?
Perfectly.
After a tumultuous 30 a year and 3 months and 15 days, after a stormy career that, as you know, I've been criticizing sharply here. I can't say you were defending him, but you thought my criticism often too harsh. So I will lay it out now that we have a complete perspective. I won't return to things we discussed in recent shows in too many details, but rather take the long view and say that Herzi Halevi was the hero of the press in Israel because he did not deal with the refuseniks in the army, in the reserve units throughout the battle over judicial reform. And in that respect, not dealing with them is basically to support them. Although he said that this is a danger to Israel's security, he did not dismiss the rabble rousers and the ringleaders of the refuseniks. Some of them were returned to their reserve jobs in elite units until there was a public outcry, which caused Halevi to suspend them. And the other side of the same coin is he drove out all the aggressive commanders who did not share his, as we call it now, progressive vision. People like Ofer Winter, who were exceptional field commanders, were driven out, and he was not alone. You may not know the names, but there was a whole bunch of people that Halevi drove away. There was also an incident in which the IDF hit the what's the name of these human rights worker in the International Kitchen? I'm blanking on it now.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the name of that. Jose Andres' thing. Yeah.
I'll dig this up in a minute, but there was they accidentally hit some. The IDF accidentally hit some relief workers. After this was investigated, it turned out that the IDF soldiers who conducted the operation did exactly what they are supposed to do according to IDF regulation. It was the relief workers who got into a vehicle with armed Hamas terrorists and did not signal that they were there. And Halevi then sacrificed them to please international opinion instead of backing them. That's not the only incident where he did not back his own commanders when they were doing what they're supposed to do, be aggressive at war. Then Halevi did the worst of all things. He decided on the night between the 6th and 7th of October, he decided on his own authority not to wake up the Minister of Defense, which was then Yoav Gallant, or the Prime Minister. He took the decisions himself. He did not raise the level of alert, which caused soldiers to be slaughtered in their beds by Hamas terrorists who invaded on that night. The whole of the army was not alerted to the danger, although there were very clear signals that a major attack was imminent. He then mishandled the day of October 7. It took about 8 hours till the IDF showed in force and was able to do something. Until that time, there were only sporadic commanders taking their own initiative, reserve soldiers coming back with their weapons from home, or people just throwing themselves into the fire with bare hands or a car to try to rescue some of the victims. And since then, he has been conducting the war in a way that, as we plainly see, Mike, did not lead to victory. He was the architect of the raids strategy, in which the IDF does not hold territory, but rather invades repeatedly, as they do in commandos. over and against the orders of his superiors in the elected government, who wanted some of these spaces occupied, at least temporarily. So and not only that, maybe most importantly, he was against every step of escalation of this war from the beginning. Mike, you can basically see him shadowing the American administration in their resistance of a ground operation, then the invasion of Gaza City, then the invasion of Khan Yunis, then the invasion of Rafah, then the Philadelphia corridor.
Can I stop you there?
Not yet. Just
on this particular point, I want a clarification, because I had never heard that before. He was echoing the Americans on each one of these. Is this well established?
Yes, it is. On good authority. I'm not sure that at every point at the same time, but he was dragging his feet and resisting every major enlargement of this operation. I'll say more in a minute. But also when the position of the Israeli government was that there would be no hostage deal without with pulling out of the Philadelphia corridor, he went out to the press and said that if we retreat from the Philadelphia corridor, the IDF will be able to handle the situation. This comes from a man who couldn't handle the situation on October 7 and audaciously was undermining the official position, the negotiating position of his own government. Then came the Beeper operation, and as I've said here more than once, someone in the brass of the IDF, it's most probably Halevi himself, and I know Halevi himself was against the operation of the beepers. He reportedly said to the prime minister, the fact that you have a toy does not mean that necessarily you have to play with it. He also leaked about 15 hours before the operation that Israel is about to embark on a reckless operation in Lebanon, which can ignite a regional war. He tried to stop that. He was also against the taking out of Nasrallah. So basically, Herzi Halevi was against any aggressive action by Israel. And had we followed him, we would have lost this war. As it were, we kept him and we only did not win it, at least not in Gaza, and at least not yet.
So why is he leaving now? Although, by the way, there was one other thing you didn't mention, and I don't know if you want to, because you told me this in private. I'm not sure if it's something you want to talk about publicly, but some of his attitudes and actions with respect to the most recent controversies surrounding the leaks and so on. Do you want to talk about that?
I don't think there's any secret in that, but I'm not sure what you're hinting at. But let's try, and if it's necessary, I'll just cut it out after.
Oh no, you told me that he was suppressing the investigation of and intimidating witnesses.
Absolutely, I said no. I said we said this on the program. So it was
I don't remember where you told me these things. So
I'll just mention it very briefly again. There is a state comptroller in Israel. This is Matanyahu Engelman, and he is authorized to investigate the failure of October 7. And Herzi Halevi set up a unit in his office of his people who are to chaperone anyone from the IDF who is invited to give testimony to the state comptroller, including recording them, which is forbidden. So clearly he's intimidating him. I'll also say that we haven't, the friction with the new Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, began the minute Israel Katz said at the end of January, I want the internal IDF investigation of October 7 handed to me. Mike, this is one night, one day, 24 hours, and it is taking them a year and 3 months to investigate that. Clearly, Herzi Halevi is dragging its feet with that too. So when the Minister of Defense said the end of January is your deadline, clearly everyone understood. That means by the end of January, you put your keys on the table, as we say in Hebrew, or throw in the towel, as we say in English, I think, and you are gone. So the clock has been ticking. Why was it that he did this immediately after the Trump inauguration? I'll tell you what's on the right-wing feed in Israel. The right-wing feed said this Israeli, with scare quotes, commander of the IDF is just leaving when his bosses are leaving office in Washington.
Or his protectors.
Yeah, no, the joke was his bosses.
But
yeah,
obviously.
Yeah,
but a plausible interpretation of what the previous statement you made about Israel Katz is that Netanyahu put Israel Katz in place in order to fire Herzi Halevi.
That's also
is that a legitimate interpretation?
I think it's a legitimate interpretation, or at the very least, we can say he replaced Yoav Gallant, who was protecting Herzi Halevi, because Yoav Gallant saw himself as representing the IDF to the government. He is part of this milieu. He grew up in the IDF. He was supposed to be the chief of staff of the IDF, but was intercepted by the judicial junta for some minor infraction in zoning in his own in the village where he lives. Apparently, he appropriated a small parcel of public land for his for the road that leads to his property, and so he was intercepted. But he remained loyal to the same junta. And as you remember, he was the one to halt the judicial reform, because instead of representing the government to the army, he put himself at the head of the army rebellion and crossed the Rubicon, as it were, into politics with the IDF, symbolically, of course. Not
so physically. This means that we should read from this that Netanyahu is stronger than ever.
Yes. In terms of the bureaucratic infighting, but not necessarily at the moment in terms of public opinion, because the right is now furious with Netanyahu for the deal. And people are saying on the right that Israel has capitulated. Of course, the pictures of Hamas celebrations in Gaza exacerbate that. And it is seen by some on the right as a capitulation to the anti-Netanyahu bring them home now campaign, which, as I said here often, is not a campaign to bring back the hostages. It is a campaign to take down the Netanyahu government.
So he's taken a hit in terms of public opinion on the deal, on the deal on the right. But in terms of the intra-governmental conflict, he's stronger than ever. Who's he gonna? Is there any speculation as to who he's gonna appoint in place of Herzi Halevi?
And no, but there are demands that it would be Ofer Winter, which was pushed out of the army and basically silenced by Herzi Halevi. What they did to him is they kept him in the army without a specific job, and so he could not express his opinions. He was forbidden to express his opinions. He has very clear opinions about how the war should be run, and he became the symbolic figure for all those who are sick and tired of the self-righteous wing of the IDF, in which it is more important to be exquisitely moral than to win the war. I think I quoted my friend Roy Dan, the comedian, who said that the IDF is clearly the most moral army in the world. It's also the only army in the competition.
All right, what else do we have to say about this?
You were I wouldn't say you were a defender of Herzi Halevi, but you thought I was overly harsh with my criticism.
No, my point of view is that the soldiers often have to take decisions on the basis of military logic, and when that military logic contradicts the political perceptions, they are perceived as political actors. So I don't have information that you don't have. I mean, I don't have some, you have more information than I do. I'm just naturally resistant to rush to the political interpretation first. That's the,
Well, I'm not, so I'll say a word about that too, and then we can move
just
on
to keep ourselves, just to keep ourselves honest.
No,
It's why, by the way, it is also the reason why I resist you, in all seriousness, on the question of defining our tagline here as we cut through the media bias. I do think we do that. I absolutely think we do that. But the media bias is so left wing that what I don't want to be is a trumpet for the right wing bias, because there's a right wing line as well. And I want to be non-ideological. Obviously, I'm more comfortable on the right than I am on the left, much more comfortable for all kinds of reasons. But I want to be. I don't want to be overtly ideological.
That's a good thing. I think I tend to get carried away more than you do, and it's good to have a counterbalance. Are you surprised? You look surprised for a minute that I said that.
No, I wasn't surprised. I was fiddling with my phone here. Somebody named Scam Likely is trying to get a hold of me.
So here is my very political interpretation, and I put it on Twitter today. Sorry, Herzi Halevi, from the minute the American administration began to demand a clear definition of the day after, a plan for the day after, he started clamoring for the day after too. And he kept saying that he can't orient the army if he doesn't know to which political goal the army actions should be aligned. And this is not his business. You got ordered to win this war, and when he and crush Hamas, not to prepare for the day after. And clearly, Mike, when he demanded clear instructions about the day after, he was not demanding any instruction. He was trying to push the government to agree to the American plan for the day after, because obviously he's a very sharp bureaucratic player. And he knew that what I keep saying here, that the goal, that the day after is occupation. There is no alternative. I don't know for how long, but there is no alternative to taking the full area and administering it. And since he knew the government cannot say that, he was basically trying to trap them so that they would acquiesce to the American plan, or at least say that they do. This was what he was trying to do, because he is part and parcel of the Oslo establishment. He has been educated in American universities. He's part of the peace processing machinery, and he was trying to maneuver the IDF away from holding territory, which is actually the way he ran this war. And remember also that he's comfortable with that since he's a commando veteran. And the people who come from elite units, as a friend of mine, I'm not sure, a general friend of mine, who I'm not sure would like me to quote him by name, he said, these people don't know anything about war. They come from special ops. Special ops are always, mission impossible, precision, planned. War is an unplanned, chaotic operation, and the people who think that it's conducted like a special ops on a grand scale just don't understand what an army is and what a war is. And repeatedly we have commanders from special ops, and this is how Halevi, and I should have said that the most important thing, Halevi is part of the conceptia. The conceptia is defense through technology. It's Star Wars. It is unable to deal with more than one front, and especially not with low tech, even when it's just Mad Max and not whole, Iraqi armies as we feared in the 90s with huge armor divisions.
All right. Of course, the other part of the conception is air power. And just to remind everybody, after I went to Israel after October 7th, I heard a phrase I had never heard. I'd heard many times people say that the IDF is an army that sees itself as an army that has a country. And then the new line was the IDF is an air force that has an army that has a country.
Exactly.
That's the other, by the way, that's the other reason why I sometimes show skepticism toward your more political interpretations of the military's behavior. I know from my own experience in the White House during the Second Lebanon War that the IDF is a force unto itself in Israeli politics. Always has been, always will be, I'm sure, until I die. The idea of civilian control over security policy, it's a lovely idea, and I guess it exists, you know, it does exist in some form or another, but it's not as strong as it is in some other countries, and and it's actually very difficult in those circumstances to be an IDF leader because you often don't get from the political echelon the guidance that you do need to do what you do. So we just need to be aware of that the IDF has always been semi-independent, I think. That's wrong, but that's an exaggeration, semi-independent, but it is a force unto itself.
And you know that the coup perpetrators against judicial reform, those who leverage the army to basically to force the government to submit to the will of the elites, now have this jargon about how the appointed echelons of the state bureaucracy are the true guardians of the public interest, and the politicians are these wild animals who should be restrained. My Hebrew podcast is called Shomer Saf, which is an ironic name because that's how they perceive themselves. They are the gatekeepers to prevent the politicians from going wild. And so they keep talking about the importance of the independence of the judiciary, but by which they mean no checks and no balances towards that branch of government. And now they're also talking about the importance of the independence of the military, which is
you have to admit, though, you have to admit that a lot of Israelis, and you know, it could possibly even be that in your own lifetime you were one of them. You're not now, but when they look at the Knesset and they look at the proceedings of the Knesset, they see a bunch of children bickering, and they do not feel that their security is best guaranteed by the proceedings of that august body.
No, I'm not sure I was, because I was always a Democrat, and I think democracy is a messy thing. I've been critical of the way some parties appoint their members. I've also been critical of the primary system, which I think is on balance still the best and better than.
Okay, forget about you personally, but a lot of Israelis, not just the upper echelons of the military, are not confident in the Knesset. And that's part of the reason they were skeptical of the judicial reform and and historically they have felt more secure. The IDF has been respected much more in the public's eyes than the elected officials.
Yeah, I don't think that's universally true. The IDF has failed so badly, and it was actually the elected politicians who had it right the whole time. And so I think that the elites are bent on portraying any elected body as wild, messianic, radical, and right-wing. This is because they are most comfortable with their own brand of progressive elites. And
No,
so
I'm talking about historically. Obviously, we're in a special moment right now where
historically, they trusted the IDF. We had an inclination to bring IDF commanders into the civil service and then into political parties. I've had Effie Etam, the fierce former brigade, not brigade, is it brigade? We always get stuck with this. Division commander. He was a very fierce division commander and a member of the National Religious Party, who said he said on my podcast, he said, whenever I go to speak to IDF chiefs of staff, I take a moment to stand near the wall where there are pictures of all the IDF commanders, chiefs of staff since the establishment of the state, and I call it a tragic wall. They're all very competent people. Most of them were brave commanders in the field, but whenever they went out to politics, you discovered that one after the other, they were hollow, he said. They lacked any serious vision beyond their professional capacity. And I think that the Israeli romance with generals has been, you're right to point it out, has been unfortunate. And it's strange that the left in Israel worships generals. Look at the political map, one after the other. Who is leading left-wing parties? Who is now the most radical, half-crazy, semi-Bolshevik, semi-fascist Yair Golan, inciting to a civil rebellion in the midst of a war? This is Yair Golan, who on the Holocaust Day said that he is perceiving processes in Israeli society that remind him of the 30s in Europe. So these people come out of the army, and then they turn out to be the most progressive and the most left wing. So obviously this is not a healthy part of our political culture, and we should wean ourselves off it.
All right. Should we move on to Donald Trump?
Donald Trump. Remind me, that's the new president, isn't it?
The new president.
The old new president.
Did you see his inauguration speech?
I heard it.
Yeah, it was
I heard
it
it
was
on
excellent. Much better than the previous one, I have to say. Clearly he learned a few lessons from the last one.
And he got a lot of applause even for the things that horrified progressive crowds, at least here.
I mean, basically, he announced that the progressivism has come to an end.
Mike, you now have only two options for your gender, and you will have to be clear about that henceforth.
That is true. That is true. All of this ambiguity that I've been wallowing in or reveling in has to come to an end.
Yeah. So what are the important takeaways for the future of Israel in the Middle East?
We still have big question marks over the future of Israel in the Middle East. As we discussed last time, the hostage agreement, the ceasefire, that's a mixed message at best. On the one hand, it's fantastic to see these people come home, but the deal, if it's carried through to all of its stages, the three different stages, the framework is the Biden framework, which leads ultimately to the Israeli withdrawal and the continued presence of Hamas as the ruling body in Gaza. There's no vision there. The vision from Trump was in the conflict. Get a deal. It wasn't, we want to see Israeli victory. So we'll have to see how it goes. But there's just ambiguity throughout the ruling. I mean, the leading figures in the Trump cabinet in most important positions. That is Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, head of the CIA, Ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador to Israel, National Security Advisor. They're all fantastic with regard to the two issues that I think we should all be focused on, which is bilateral Israeli-U.S. relations and Iran. They're all fantastic. But there's this undercurrent that we have discussed here of the Tucker Carlson wing of the party that is showing itself increasingly. In the last couple of days, two things happened that are of note, which many of our viewers may have already noted, but perhaps they haven't. One is that Michael Domino was sworn in as the DASD, that's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. And Michael Domino comes from the Tucker Carlson Quincy Institute wing of the party. That is, he's historically been in favor of some kind of agreement with Iran. Believes that the support for Israel in the war with Iran is excessive, and so on and so forth. This is not an accident. He didn't slip in unknown. His views. He's a former CIA military analyst. His views are well known, and he has been very public about them. The Bridge Colby is going to be the undersecretary. Domino will answer to Bridge Colby. He'll be the undersecretary of defense. Colby has also historically been in favor of reducing the importance of the Middle East, reducing the American military footprint in the Middle East, cutting a deal with Iran, etc. So, in other words, as I think I said here, the Tucker Carlson wing of the party is repackaging Obama's Iran realignment as the essence of MAGA. And they are getting a lot of their people in place. Pete Hegseth who's going to be looks like almost certainly will be confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. He was not given the ability to choose all of the people underneath him. So he got the job. His job is obviously it's a very important job, and obviously Domino is going to have to conform to the Pete Hegseth worldview. But Domino himself knows that he did not get chosen by Hegseth. He was put in there by other elements who have a different vision. Clearly, Trump wants to have a variety of different points of view. He, as I said here, I think before, he's riding two horses. He's riding the Tucker Carlson horse, and he's riding the Mike Huckabee horse. And we need to be aware of this. It's not going to be a rubber stamp for Israel on any of its major security questions. There's going to be a debate. I'm relatively confident that where this is going to end up is going to be somewhere that we're much better than where it was under the Biden administration. But I don't know what the specific policies are going to be. The key issues that I would like to have answers to, and I have no idea at this point, is what is going to be the position on pressuring Iran. The first decisions, I would have loved it if on day one Donald Trump had said return to maximum pressure on Iran, but he didn't do that. So I don't know what the pressure campaign is going to look like, the sanctions campaign. I don't know what the military component of pressure on Iran is going to look like. Is there going to be an American military component at all? If you noticed in his speech, he said that one of the greatest things that's going to happen under him is the wars that we are not going to get into. That's we're going to avoid war.
He also said he wanted to be remembered as a peacemaker. No president has said that, I think, since Woodrow Wilson in 1913.
So peacemaker and the deal, and he made reference to the deal that he just facilitated between the Israelis and Hamas as an example of his peacemaking. So it isn't clear. I think it's very clear to say Donald Trump does not completely share my own preferred vision for American foreign policy, which is that we see that the job of the United States is to weaken Iran and across the region, and to eliminate its nuclear program. Michael Domino in the Defense Department has said that the Houthis are no problem for the United States. We don't need to worry about them.
Not even international shipping should worry about them.
Don't have to worry about it because the Middle East doesn't matter.
Um, we there's it's hard to compare to the first administration of Trump's, but remember also that in the beginning of his first administration, he had Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State, and he also did not orient his foreign policy against the JCPOA. That took a long time to come, and so perhaps what he's doing is preserving all options for now, and this may mean that he hasn't decided yet.
Oh, I think that is a certainty. He's preserving options, making sure that a variety of options are presented to him, and making sure that everybody understands that he's the decider. By the way, I much prefer Marco Rubio over Rex Tillerson, although I was quite excited by Rex Tillerson. He was kind of an unknown quantity, but I thought it was a very inspired choice at the time. Turned out to be a bit of a disappointment. But look, there are some signs that are, let's say, I was going to say discomforting, but that's too strong. But I was going to say there was another appointment that Trump made, or another staffing decision that he made that was an interesting indicator. He excommunicated Brian Hook. Brian Hook was his Iran envoy in the first administration. Brian Hook also led the transition team in the State Department at this moment, and he was, I am reliably informed, he was being considered at one point. He was a leading candidate for the Undersecretary of State position for policy. But there was a movement against him. It's not clear exactly who led the movement, but he was identified as a quote unquote Pompeo guy, I believe. And, you remember that Trump put out that Truth Social post a few weeks ago saying that, or a month ago, saying that Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo would not be part of the administration.
Yeah.
And then people associated with them are also being iced out. But Brian Hook has a security detail from State Department security because he's under a death threat from Iran for the work that he did for Donald Trump in the first administration. So it's to see him excommunicated in that way. I don't know what I don't know exactly why he was, but it was a little bit unnerving for me, especially as it came at the same time that we heard about Michael Domino in the Defense Department. Brian Hook is very much associated with maximum pressure against Iran. He's the guy who oversaw, implemented that policy. It wouldn't surprise me at all, Gadi, if this line of thinking started to emerge in the Trump administration.
Is he going to revoke the security clearance of the 51 intelligence experts who?
I read a report that said he did that.
He did it already. It was done.
Yeah. I didn't go deep into it. I just saw. I just saw like a headline saying that he did that.
I noticed that none of them were pardoned in advance by Joe Biden. So
I hate to say that because there are people on that list who are actually friends of mine or people that I once counted as friends. But I thought that was the most outrageous thing that I had ever seen because it was
the original letter.
The original letter, for people who don't,
orchestrated by Anthony Blinken.
Orchestrated by Anthony Blinken. This is when the New York Post started reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop, which we now know was 100% true. They signed a letter saying, we haven't seen the laptop or the report, but this bears all the earmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. And they completely, they beclowned themselves as serious intelligence officers. Complete politicization of the intelligence community. I was shocked that they would do it.
They saved Biden's bid for the presidency.
Yes, yes, helped justify the censorship that Facebook and Twitter and others engaged in, YouTube, on the issue, kept it out of the headlines. But I was going to say that I would expect an argument to arise now, Gadi, which is that the Israelis weakened Iran so much that we don't actually have to prepare for any kind of military conflict with it, that it's unnecessary to attack its nuclear program, because now the scene has been set for a negotiation over the nuclear program. It wouldn't surprise me if Donald Trump decided to try a negotiation with Iran before putting any serious military pressure on it. I think that I wouldn't say that it's the most likely outcome. I'm expecting to see Israel begin military actions on its own against Iran, and the United States having to decide what attitude to take toward that. That's what I think is the most likely thing, but not by much. I mean, it's I'd say 60-40 that we may well see a U.S.-Iranian negotiation.
There are a few other things that Trump took action on or declared that he would, and these have to do with sanctions against Israeli settlers. That's a very important thing, because the American administration was basically meddling in Israeli politics in a very vulgar way and undermining Israel's sovereignty by sanctioning specific individuals in Israel as part of a political campaign to destabilize the right-wing government. He also declared he would halt the American support for UNRWA. This is also a major issue, and that he would re-establish sanctions on the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Mike, I've improved on that greatly. And these are all very important and encouraging steps. To top it all, it is rumored that he would lift the ban on ammunition, which was the major leverage of American pressure on Israel throughout this war. People are not aware to the extent of that weapons embargo, although, Mike, you clearly are. You wrote a piece about it called Biden's Italian strike, I think, on tablets.
Yeah.
This was a very crucial impediment on our ability to win the war, almost as crucial as Herzi Halevi. So we might want to say a few words on each of this, given the time constraints, not at too much length. So I will start by saying something about UNRWA, because I can offer an internal Israeli angle on this. In the argument over responsibility, which is heightening again now after Herzi Halevi's resignation. Herzi Halevi said he would take responsibility at the beginning of the war, but hasn't, because he hasn't resigned. So now he has, and of course the media is clamoring for Netanyahu's resignation. Well, Herzi did the right thing. When are you going to do the right thing?
I know. I saw that Nadav Eyal and Ben Caspit, they wrote their articles again. I mean, about every 2 weeks they have to say Netanyahu has to go. Netanyahu is responsible. Well, they've written it again.
So this is an actual mainstay of the campaign against Netanyahu, and it's a difficult argument to balance. It's more difficult than it seems, because on the face of it, you were at the head of the head of state when this happened, so you are responsible. This is the campaign known as Ata Rosh Ata Hashem. You're the head. You are guilty. And some people are saying, well, Roosevelt was at the helm when Pearl Harbor happened, and America did not call for his resignation. So this call, it's not enough to say that he was the head of state. So there's a narrative that says that Netanyahu actually helped Hamas grow or supported it with Qatari money, because he was the one to authorize the deal by which Qatar was paying for some of the civil services of the Hamas government in Gaza. And that is clearly an unfair argument. The minute you decide that you are going to, as the military advised and intelligence advised, to keep the standard of living in Gaza from dropping below a certain level, because that would create a instability, it matters not where the money comes from. And the whole Qatari money thing, it was in cash, so it looks seedy. It was in suitcases in dollars, but it looks seedy. But this was $30 million. Through UNRWA, Hamas has been receiving a yearly sum of $1 billion. And none of those people clamoring against Netanyahu based on the Qatari money have been saying anything about stopping UNRWA, because, of course, UNRWA is part of the UN and it operates under the cover of relief and human rights. But UNRWA is Hamas in Gaza. There's no, as I've said here, I think I mentioned the numbers of the almost 13,000 UNRWA employees. 12,000 are either card-carrying Hamas members or are married to card-carrying Hamas members. So that was a very hypocritical point, and Donald Trump made it clear the minute he said that he would withdraw American support from UNRWA. That's one thing. The calling off of the sanctions, I think we completely concur on, Mike. You've written against it. You want to say something about that?
Just that it's become increasingly clear that that the Biden administration assigned Gaza policy, almost the lead on Gaza policy, to the Human Rights Bureau of the State Department and the humanitarian aid, the refugees, the bureaus responsible for aid, refugees, and human rights were given an elevated position in the policy making toward Gaza. This is a new thing where you historically in the State Department, the regional bureaus are the kings, or I guess you'd say the queens of the bureau, and they have more power than these other ones. Now, I'm not saying that the head of the regional bureau was against this policy of giving the humanitarian assistance and human rights bureaucracies more of a role, but it's unprecedented, and this is what created this thing that I called the sanctions machine. They did it on purpose. This didn't happen by accident, but it was made to look to the outside world like they were responding. They were responding to developments on the ground in a kind of pragmatic way, rather than working to create a perception of things on the ground by putting these organizations in the lead. It's wonderful that Trump has already affected a rebalancing inside the State Department by his decisions. That's very good. But I want there to be investigations of this. Ideally, I would like hearings in Congress on it. But beyond that, I would like to see the Trump administration actually dismantle these bureaus. Maybe not entirely, but the executive order that Trump put out, stopping all of the humanitarian aid or putting a 90-day pause on it, said that no aid. The general principle is that no aid programs should be continued unless they are in pursuit of a very clear American national interest. And that on that basis, I hope to see these bureaus radically restructured, and anybody who had anything to do with this effort to denigrate Israel, which is what it was, This was not simply an effort to get humanitarian aid to Gazans. This was an effort to delegitimate Israel and downgrade it in American foreign policy. And I would like to see anybody who was engaged in that activity will see that their career will take a blow. You'll spend 5 years, stamping visas in I don't know where, but somewhere that's very unattractive, not in a European capital.
All right. So we'll be following this too. Mike, we are skipping very conveniently for you, we are skipping the viewers' comments for now, which is your domain. And so we are sparing you the fact that.
But we're going to talk about weren't we going to, didn't we say that we're going to talk about this criticism of me of being a naive American leftist?
I think we'll save it until you savor the taste of the comments for.
Okay. So we'll do it we'll do it next time. Okay.
Yeah. And so I just have one minor dumb mistake on the news, and this is
before you go to dumb mistake, just in anticipation of our debate on this question. Can you tell me, I'm asking you out of curiosity, what do you think my answer to this is going to be? This being, I said last time that Israel has failed to create an alternative leadership in Gaza, an alternative Palestinian leadership in Gaza, and this project is very important and urgent even. Obviously, one of the reasons they didn't want to do it is that the American administration was saying there has to be an alternative, and we know what that alternative is. It's a Palestinian Authority. And I said, no, you have to dismantle Hamas and create an alternative. And you said that's impossible. What's my answer going to be to you? Do you know?
No, I actually don't.
Okay, all right. Okay, it's good. No, that's interesting because I thought by now that my perspective was very clear, but I see that it's not on this. We do have to actually spend some time arguing about this because I got so many emails from people saying, Mike, listen to Gadi. You're so wrong. You're naive. You're a naive American, Mike. You don't understand what evil lurks in the hearts of the average Gazan, and so on. And I realize that my perspective has not been adequately expressed. So
I'll give you that. You are not as naive as some Americans, because as my friend Professor Kobi Michaeli said he's been dealing. He created the joint security apparatus of Israelis and Palestinians in the territory. So he has hands-on experience with the Palestinians for many years. And he kept saying, the Americans believe that deep down in every terrorist, there is a little Jefferson trying to fight his way out and make peace with Israel. I know you're not that naive, but also you're not as far from that as you like to think. And we shall return to that.
That was
underhanded.
No. Well, it was just
provoke the beast now.
It was just wrong. Yeah. So I will unleash the beast on you next week.
Next time. Yeah. All right. So the dumb mistake on the news, it's actually infuriating. And this guy should not be in our Knesset. And this is a testimony to the fact that Israel is an extremely tolerant democracy, and it's ridiculous that they call it an apartheid. We have a member of Knesset, an Arab member of Knesset, called Ayman Odeh, from the leftist communist wing of the Joint Arab List, and he expressed his happiness over the deal of the hostages, and he said, "I am happy over the release of the hostages and the prisoners." And so he creates this equivalence between the kidnapped Israeli women who were abused by Hamas and the baby murderers which Israel holds in its jails. And this is just revolting, that you are happy over the release of people who did horrors like the ones we witnessed on the October 7th. And the people in the press who are applauding Ayman Odeh as a an exemplary activist for coexistence between Arabs and Jews, they might do well to remember that in his vision of coexistence, the heroes are exactly the heroes of the Palestinian Authority and of Hamas, those who, in the service of the Palestinian cause, have maximized the death and suffering of Jews. So that's basically it from us for today. And in the next episode, you will see Mike defending his
in my role here as the guy that never lets you transition to the next segment.
How can you do this at the very end? What can you possibly say now, Mike?
I want to read you one quote, which, and it's not necessarily the dumbest take, but it's I think it's interesting. It relates to what we were talking about earlier about the ceasefire deal. So I'm reading here that in an interview on Fox News, Steve Witkoff, who's going to be the Middle East coordinator for Trump in the White House, and who was the negotiator for Trump on the ceasefire deal, he said in an interview, "I convinced the parties to close the deal by telling them that Trump expects the truth. We did not deal with the math of the deal. You know, how many prisoners for how many hostages. That was closed in May under the Biden administration. So the deal was already there on the table," he's saying. "Our role was to expedite the process." So this is what I find, what raises questions in my mind. In what other area would Trump say, "I'm just going to endorse the Biden policy" without rethinking it? There was an opportunity here to rethink, and they didn't take it. And I'm curious to know, and it raises questions about whether this is a one-off. This is just in order to get the deal before the inauguration, or whether this is going to presage more continuity between Biden and Trump than I might be comfortable with. I'm assuming the discontinuity, as I said, will be much greater. I'm assuming it on the basis of personnel and history and everything else. But I would not have predicted this. That's all I'm saying. I would never have predicted this.
I thought you were going to mention another quote, which our friend Caroline Glick retweeted with a disclaimer of her own, where Witkoff said that he hoped that the radicals on both sides would not derail the deal. And he explicitly said that there are such extremists on both sides, and mentioned the extremists on the Israeli side. So he too has been creating an equivalence between Hamas.
Once you come into the Middle East with a businessman's perspective and you say the goal is a deal, there's a deal there to be had, and that is the goal, then you're gonna end up being taken advantage of, or you're gonna end up cutting deals that work against the United States and its allies. It's inherent in that approach. You have to say, I have a strategy to weaken the allies, to weaken the enemies of the United States and to strengthen its allies. That strategy can include negotiation and getting certain deals, but I'm not putting deal as the essence of my strategy.
Yeah, well, that's as you say, on the face of it, this was also Trump's attitude, the art of the deal, the businessman attitude, and so forth. But with this, please allow me, your gracious majesty, to close this not deal, but broadcast.
Permission granted.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us for this whole hour. Don't forget to like our channel, to comment, and to subscribe, and we will be here with you next week.
And to share.
And share alike.